Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Let me begin by sharing my screen just a little bit. And I don't know if you can see that, but Jambo. Allow me to make a quick commercial for an exciting Swahili table that one of our graduate students, Lydia Weremo Gethinji, has been conducting this semester under the guidance of Dr. Fusa. So Jambo, anybody who can respond to that, you're welcome, Jambo. And it is a pleasure to have you here this evening. I also want to greet you in another language that is so dear to my heart. Mbiyamore, onyemore biya na inche mbiyande. Let me give you a quick translation of that. It says, if you are doing well, that is the greeting in my native language. If you are doing well, I am doing well too. That is my kind of greeting to you tonight. If you are doing well, I am doing well too. I want to thank you, Dr. Thompson, for that very generous introduction. I feel honored and favored to be included on the list of the notable women of ETSU that we've just been watching on the screen. It's such a privilege. Thanks to everyone behind the camera tonight for being here to rejoice with Dr. Cook and I. I want to thank the committee for selecting me. I know there are so many excellent women here at ETSU that you could have chosen for this year's award, but you chose me. Thank you. Thank you. I would also like to send a very special thank you to my friends in the Literature and Language Department who nominated me. I now know who you are. You sneaked up on me, but that's okay. I love you all. You succeeded in keeping this a secret. I don't know how you did that, but I appreciate you so much. You nominated me a few years ago, and you've done it again. And I thank you for your kindness and sustained support. You know, it's one thing to have a job you like, but it's an even greater blessing to do that job in the company of friends, to be in a place where every morning when you wake up to go to work, you know you're going to be right in the middle of people who care. And that has been the greatest blessing for me. I've enjoyed being in the literature and language department. I leave home in the morning, of course, the pre-pandemic era, and go to another home where I work. I won't mention all the names here. It's a large department, but thank you all, my literature and language squad under the direction of Dr. Westover. You are such a blessing. So when you nominated me, probably you didn't know that you are nominating a whole group of men and women who have been my greatest supporters in this journey. First and foremost, I want to send my gratitude to my husband and our children, my family. Thank you so much for your continued support. Thank you for being the most powerful cheerleaders in my personal and professional journey. I see you all on the screen and I'm so happy. You continue to see potential in me. You continue to encourage me, even on days when I can't see that potential. I'm very fortunate, very blessed to have you, Edward, Marion, Sarah, Eunice, in my life. And I thank God for you every day. My gratitude to my parents, to my sisters and brothers, come from a big, happy family. I thank my family for the unfailing love and support that they continue to give me, and the values that my family instilled in me of faith, of resilience, of empathy, and hard work. And I couldn't really be here or do much without them. So today, when I was thinking of what to how to go about my presentation, what to talk about, I really didn't know where to start. And I had to go back to the people who've made a difference in my life, the people who have supported my journey to finding and doing what I love. And so my focus tonight is going to be on what I've learned, that I learn from and I'm inspired by people and communities that I meet along my journey. And there are so many of them, there are so many communities, but I promise you, I won't take the entire evening. So my love for language begins right here. My journey begins in Kisii, Kenya, rural Kisii, Kenya. And that is where my love for language and my curiosity started. Somewhere in those mountains lies a home where I was raised. I grew up in a multilingual Kenya with English as the official language, Kiswahili as the national language. Now it is an official language too, and several Kenyan ethnic languages. Even as a child, it did not take long for me to learn that people around me navigated life using several languages for a variety of functions. My older siblings spoke Ekegusi, my ethnic language, when they were interacting with us, but they spoke English and Kiswahili or some code mix when they were discussing their schoolwork, because all their homework, all their books were in English. And it is within this community that I began to discover my curiosity for language and to discover that power of language to connect people. I thoroughly intertwined and overlapping with my family was my church community. My family attended church and still does every Saturday. We sang songs in at least 3 different languages. Songs in Kiswahili, songs in English, songs in Ekegusi. And our Bible study hour was divided into different groups. And in each of these different groups, various languages were used. For the very young ones, the lessons were taught in the ethnic language. But for the school age children and young adults, the discussions that most people engaged in were in English or Swahili. Saturday afternoons, we went back to church again. And if someone in our study group or in our age group had bought or received a new book, we read it together, or we borrowed it and passed it around until everyone who was interested had had a chance to read. That was our library. We should probably have called it a book club, but no, we didn't. So once again, just like in my family, my church community fostered not only my understanding and valuing of language in a multilingual context, but it also inculcated a reading culture and a sense of community and sharing, something I'll forever be thankful for. So when I joined high school, that's my little school there, called Nyabururu Girls High School. When I joined high school, a girls' secondary school, that's what we called it, a girls' boarding school during my early teenage years, I was around 12, 13 years, I quickly realized that the variety of English I had spent my many years learning was not the same as those of my classmates. It wasn't the same as those of that of my teachers. We did not pronounce things exactly the same way, but we understood each other. My schoolmates were from all over the country, and they represented different Kenyan languages. Kenya has a diversity of ethnic languages. I don't know if you can see very well on this map. There are over 42 ethnic languages spoken in Kenya. And I'm saying languages, not dialects. So they are all very different from each other. And so my schoolmates who came to this, if you can see that little blue spot there, that is where my high school was. And my classmates came from all over the country. They spoke different ethnic languages. But when we got here together, we had to use a common language. And so we kind of pushed aside our ethnic languages and spoke Kiswahili and English all the time. Our teachers were also from very diverse backgrounds. My English teachers, for instance, I had a Mrs. Konje from Luoland, somewhere here. I had a Sister Mary and Sister Anne from Scotland. I had Sister Margaret Bradbury from the US. I don't know which part of the US. I've always wanted to know. I was struck and fascinated by how one language could hold so much nuanced diversity and variance. We pronounced, for some it was water, for Sister Margaret it was water, for those of us coming from other areas it was water, but it was still the same thing and we understood each other. But it was starting to develop my curiosity in language at that early time in life. And so as I continued life in my little boarding school, I enjoyed my boarding school life. But I was fully aware that the reason I was in this good boarding school was because I had acquired some mastery of English. It was because I had enough mastery to succeed and do well in the Certificate of Primary Education National Exam. But I thought about my friends who had not mastered the language, who couldn't make it to a good high school. I thought about them. I wondered where they were and what they could do if they could not have this same privilege. So from that early age, I understood that mastery of the language, especially the language of instruction, was very essential if one was to succeed in the education system. That a language of instruction played a really key role in one's educational journey. My favorite subjects in secondary school were English literature, of course, and chemistry. I loved chemistry too, but these were on two polar ends. Chemistry, I had science, and literature and art. And I couldn't take both. The system did not allow these two to go together. So literature won. And I joined Kenyatta University to study English education. And after I joined Kenyatta University, and the motto of the university was Elimu ni nguvu, or education is power. That as we continued, and I could see what education was doing for people. It truly was power. After my graduation from Kenyatta University, I became a high school teacher. And my first assignment was to a girls' boarding school, not too far from the girls' boarding school that I attended. I taught there for about 2 years, and I was transferred to a boys' day school in the city in Nairobi. Unlike the boarding school where I knew what the girls had in their menu because I lived in the school with them, where I knew what was going on in their lives because a number of them confided in me. I was not too far age-wise. I was 21 when I started teaching. Teaching in a boys' day school was a new experience for me. And it was a boys' school in the city, and I was coming from the rural area. I learned the role that mental health played in the ability of my students to engage. And when my students' minds were elsewhere, they could not fully concentrate, and school did not matter to them at that point. I know a number of them that played clowns in the classroom and sometimes made teaching difficult. But I joined my colleague in work in serving as an informal counselor. I hadn't trained to be a counselor, but I had done educational counseling. That was a required course in college. And we started an informal counseling session where we talked with our students during their break time or after school. Those who had become really stubborn could be sent to us by their teachers to come talk to us. And I learned that sometimes the solution wasn't too far. Offering a listening ear could help. I also learned that working to alleviate the pain of others makes life better, not just for them, but for us as well. As we talked with these students, a number of them were able to confide in us what was going on in their lives. And as we started to understand, you can be sure the next day that student was not the same in class because he had had an opportunity to confide, to share the burden that he was carrying. Beyond attempting to understand the minds of these teenage boys, my students at this Pumwani Boys School taught me a lot about language. These youth spoke a language that was different from the other languages I had learned. Most of my students came from the less affluent Eastlands area of Nairobi, the melting pot of the over 42 ethnic languages. Here in this community where they lived, all the languages came into play. The students had grown up interacting with their peers from various ethnic groups in Kenya, and their languages had been influenced. So they spoke Sheng, a highly complicated code mix of English, Kiswahili, and ethnic languages. So at that time, Sheng was a shifting language which was stigmatized and rejected by the older generations of Kenyans. And probably it was because we didn't understand what the students were saying. And it was really intentional too. Students used Sheng so that they could say what they didn't want us to hear. But the language has gradually developed more systematic linguistic patterns, and it has become a primary language for a growing community of young speakers who are now imparting it on their children. So in essence, my students taught me a new language and an appreciation for the blending and the evolving nature of language. That was my other community from whom I learned a lot. Then the teacher became a student. 10 years after teaching high school, my family, by this time I had a family, um, three beautiful girls. We left Kenya and moved to the US. My husband and I embarked on a new experience of studying graduate school in a new culture and a new system of education. Our children, too, away from their cousins, many cousins, from their aunts and uncles, from their grandparents, had to quickly adapt to a new culture and make new friends. Thank you, you did. I was accepted at Purdue University and began my studies in the English Language and Linguistics program. From the diversity of the students to the diversity of the course offerings, everything in this program was incredibly attractive to me. I had classmates from all over the globe. Now, in high school, I had classmates from all over Kenya. But here, I had classmates from Kazakhstan, from Macedonia, from Japan, from Russia, from pretty much everywhere. And so I had all sorts of varieties of English in my classrooms. Most notably, during my time in this program, I had the opportunity to take a course, World Englishes, that was being offered by Dr. Maggie Barnes. Now, Maggie Barnes, who ended up becoming the chair of my dissertation, was a student of Professor Kachru. And if I have to go back, Professor Kachru, who became our grandfather, was the one who started or offered the concept or the paradigm of world Englishes. So in her class, Dr. Maggie Barnes gave us an opportunity to discuss a lot of things to do with world Englishes. We read about English in various contexts around the world. We engaged in intense conversations on what it means for English to be so widely spread around the world, to be so widely taught and spoken in diverse contexts. We talked about various implications of such spread. What did it mean um, for English to be so spread around the world? What were the socio-cultural implications? What were the political, educational, linguistic, and even anthropological implications of a language spreading so far and wide? We most importantly, her teachings and her advising sparked my focus in studying language within my home context, Kenya. I started thinking a lot about the language situation in Kenya. And so, using the same critical and analytical lens that she had given me, I embarked on researching English in Kenya. It was also at Purdue where, for the very first time, I had the opportunity to research and write about the questions that had always fascinated me about language and English teaching in Kenya. Now that I was away from Kenya, I would think about ways that English is taught there. I would think about, I would compare teaching English there and teaching English here in the US. I was able to engage in discussions of language as a commodity and how it can be rationed to speakers, with some getting a bigger share than others, and how language can empower and disempower people, and how that the power of a language is not in the language itself, but in its users. I studied marginalization that is brought about by the English language, and I even went ahead and explored the intersectionality between language and power. So I was growing as a student, I was growing as an individual, and in my way of thinking about language. That passion and curiosity about language in Kenya continued to grow as I transitioned from um, my career as a student to one as a professor at ETSU. I continued to ask these questions about the role language plays in my home country and everywhere. I asked questions such as, was the language of education in Kenya a first language? Was that a second language? Was it a foreign language? I found myself thinking about this and researching and publishing on topics like those. I asked myself questions such as, what were the realities now that I'm away? Let me think about it. What were the realities of the presence and accessibility of English in rural Kisii, Kenya, where I grew up? And I did, I wrote a paper on this, which gave me an opportunity to really think about the conditions under which I learned English. I researched language in education and the role of the applied linguists in Kenya. That was me thinking, what is my role? What can I do about the English language or the language situation in Kenya? I found myself thinking more and more about the impact of languages of wider communication, such as English, French, on ethnic languages around the world. What happens to languages like Kisii, my ethnic language, when you have English as an official language? Where do those other languages go? So I'm really thankful to ETSU for continued support of my research. I've been a recipient of ETSU's grants, both small and large, which have enabled me to go back to Kenya to conduct research on some of these topics. And those travels have also given me an opportunity to forge relationships between ETSU and Kisii University. I'm also thankful for my department that has often given me funds to travel and give presentations on these topics that I'm very passionate about. Now, last spring, as Dr. Thompson mentioned, I had the opportunity of, spring 2019, of spending my semester in Kisii University, collecting data and working with students and faculty at the university. This went along with a fellowship by Carnegie that allowed me to just spend time at the university and introduce them to my work at ETSU. While there, one of the best things I would say that happened, I was so privileged to welcome the ETSU Director of International Programs, Dr. Maria Koska, who came to visit. You know, it was so nice having ETSU presence at Kisi University. It was a dream I hadn't even started to dream of, but just to have ETSU at Kisi University was an awesome experience for me. Now, while my path to where I am today is uniquely mine, I can call it my path, I'm struck by the critical role that people around me and the communities around me have played in both helping me find my passion for linguistics and follow the passion into a career. I think of my fellow linguists in the department, Dr. Megari and Dr. Elihindi, who have inspired me and collaborated with me in research. I couldn't do without them. I think of my graduate students who support my research in various ways. I know I still have a lot of unfinished projects. In fact, there's a paper we've been working on with Dr. Megari that we need to get back to and complete. The journey is still on. And thankfully, my community members, my squad is still here, and we can get that done. Now, just to mention recently, I'm thinking of my latest assignment as the Associate Dean and the people who have made that transition possible for me. Here too, I found several new supportive communities that continue to inspire me. I don't know if Donna is here, but Donna, thank you. Thank you so much. I can't find words to thank you enough for the support that you've given me. So when you belong to these wonderful communities, service comes as a natural outcome. As a member of that community, I know that I am well if the rest are doing well. Remember my Kisi greeting? If you are doing well, I am doing well too. And since I belong to these wonderful communities, I am well if my community members are doing well. So any kind of service I offer, I don't really think about it as a service. It's what you do. It's what comes naturally when you are in your community. So I think of the joy that fills me when students email me to share their journey. Just this week, when I was so busy grading papers, a former student emailed me to tell me that she had just passed her prelim exams, now a PhD candidate. And it took me back several years when this student walked to my office the first time for advising. And it filled my eyes with tears just to think how far she's gone so quickly. Or I think of my honors in discipline students who get me excited, really excited when they come up with a linguistics project and start their research journey with me. I think of my Adventist Christian Fellowship group that has invited me to their weekly meetings during the pandemic and given me something to look forward to. Now, all that can count as service. I can put that on my CV as service, but it's really what you do when you belong to a wonderful community. And so I go back to where I started. I learn from the people around me. I'm inspired by those communities. And I thank you all for coming here tonight because you belong to that community. Asante sana. Back to Kiswahili where I began. And mbiyamono to my Kisi language. Thank you so much.